How are you?
Yeah, good.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for chatting with me. I appreciate it. I know you're busy. Um, Julia, you wrote this book that I want to talk to you about, How to Grow Your Business.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I want to talk a lot, but I have a lot of questions about it. But first of all, what inspired you to write the book?
Years ago, I had a marketing meeting with my marketing team actually, and
Yeah.
they were saying, "Oh, Julie, you know what? You should write a book. You have a lot to talk about." And I was like, "No, I don't have anything to talk about. Why
Yeah.
would I write a book?" And fast forward a few years later, we're talking end of 2019, early 2020. I'm thinking, well, maybe now it's time. Maybe I could write a book. Maybe I
Yeah.
could, you know,
Yeah.
um, write it. And I just
Yeah.
kind of put that to the side. I was not ready. And
Yeah.
then I decided eventually that, okay, now it's time. A year
Yeah.
or two after, I think at the end of 2020, I thought, okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's time now to get going and
Yeah.
to write it because I felt now that I had something to talk about. Um, I was not ready before,
Yeah.
but I felt at the time that now it was time for me to write it.
To write it. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. And how long did it actually take to write the book? Was it a year process?
To put it all together, it took about a year and a half, I would say, because it's a long process. It's one thing
Yeah.
to write it, but it's to decide when to release it and how it's involved and what you're going to do with it. And so
Yeah.
I would say it was a long, like a year to a year and a half
Yeah.
on top of, in between working and
Yeah.
working my business at the same time, which
Yeah.
2021, as you know, the test staffing industry, we were extremely busy.
Yeah.
So that was one of those things that I also did
Yeah.
when, and the craziness of all of it.
Pandemic, the demand for talent during the pandemic skyrocketed.
Yeah.
I just want to get I'm curious, why do you think the talent skyrocketed there? I just want to hear your thoughts on that before we get to the book. But why did talent skyrocket?
Well, it's not that it skyrocketed. The thing is, I think a lot of companies pre-pandemic thought that the market was stable, there was demand, but it was not to the craziness that it was.
Yeah.
I saw personally in our industry, the shortage started in 2017 when we
Mm,
started to notice a really big demand for talent.
okay.
If you remember in 2019, there were a lot of businesses that were struggling. Tourism was struggling, retail, stores, they were closing certain days because they didn't have staff to cover
Yeah.
those shifts at the time. And
Yeah.
then 2020 comes, all these companies are laying off all these people
Yeah.
because they have no work. And then 2021 comes, it's like, oh my gosh, we have to rehire all these people. We don't know how. These people are not available. And
Yeah.
that's where there was all this huge demand that really it was because they created their own problem. They laid off
Yeah.
all these people. And
Yeah.
now those people were placed in other positions that we didn't have more people. So we just had more positions, and that's why there
Yeah.
was such a demand. And
Yeah.
those candidates were going wherever they could find employment.
Yeah. And Julie, and salaries skyrocketed too, right? Like we were seeing
Yes,
higher salaries, right?
but we were due for an adjustment because I've been in this industry now for over 25 years, and even until 2020, the salaries that I saw were still the same as when I started early, in the late 90s. So
Mm,
it's really, we were due for an adjustment.
yeah.
Too many companies were riding the wave and just like not adjusting.
Yeah.
Now I feel there's been more adjustments, but
Yeah.
we're still not there because there's some companies that are still not up to speed as terms of compensation.
Yes. Okay. So have salaries since then, have they gone up, down, stabilized? What's your thoughts on that? Where are we with
It
salaries now?
Depending on the industry, depending on the organization, we've
Yeah.
noticed that some companies have actually decreased their salaries. They're thinking
Mm,
that they can bring the talent at a lower salaries because
yeah.
they think there's more people available.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize that those people are going to accept whatever they can get right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And when they find their ideal position, they'll just make a move
Yeah.
and go where they're going to be paid to what they want to get paid.
Yes. Yeah. So they'll take it now, but then as soon as something comes up that there was an alignment in terms of what they're looking for salary, they'll leave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's
So
gonna happen. That's what I predict is going to happen. And it's not just prediction, it's we see it happen.
yeah. Yeah. So companies really need to be mindful of their salaries and total compensation and what they're paying their employees. Otherwise, they suffer, the risk of losing good candidates.
Yeah, and they need to make sure that they're paying up to what the candidates is looking for, but also the market is paying. Because if they
Yeah.
go to the company across the street, that's going to offer them more that's along the line of what they're looking for,
Yeah.
they're going to make that move.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep their profile and keep their resume active
Yeah.
and continue going on interviews because
Yeah.
they found what they're looking for.
But sometimes, Julie, candidates overinflate their salary. Like I've spoken to candidates where they've got a couple years experience and they're looking for $90,000 when they've only had 2, 3 years experience. So sometimes I find not in all candidates, I don't want to brush them all with that brush, but they overinflate the salary in hopes that they gain a little more salary.
I call that the university effect. When they come out of university, when you go to university, and I know
Yeah.
because I've gone through that phase when I came
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
you're told by universities that you're going to get all this big bunch of money when you come out. So
Yes.
they come out, they start looking for employment, they're looking for X amount of dollars. And they realize that after 6 months, nobody is willing to pay them
Yeah.
that kind of money. Then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're seeing them reducing their expectation. Then the university effect goes back. And so there's a lot of that happening. The
Yeah.
university does that to you. And
Yeah.
also, I want to add another point is that they see their friend who's in a completely different industry
Yes.
getting 20 to 25,000 more than what they're actually getting themselves. But
Yeah.
what they don't realize that you cannot compare an apple with a pear because they're
Yes.
in a different industry and they're doing its different skill set. An
Yes.
engineer won't get the same salary as an administrative assistant. The
Yeah.
amount of education and the amount of experience and technical skills are completely different.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that also that's happening with those candidates.
So post-secondary call universities, oftentimes they mislead the students saying you're going to earn this much. If you come to our school after graduation, you could potentially earn this money.
But think about it. You grew up hearing your parents saying you need to go to school, you need to get a degree, you'll
Yeah.
be getting a good salary.
Yes.
In their head, a good salary is X amount of dollars, and
Yeah.
that's what they want. So
Yeah.
there's all of that that comes into effect when you're looking at candidates overflating their compensation. Someone has to give them a reality check as to what's really reasonable based on their skills.
So does your team sometimes give the candidates, the applicants, hey, listen, are you transparent with your applicants and tell them, listen, you're not really worth 100,000 right now?
I don't use the term worth because what candidates very often they use the term worth when they're looking for a specific salary. So
Yeah.
let's say I'm worth X amount of dollars. I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying, that you think you're worth X amount of dollars, but this job pays X because it demands for X, Y, Z. You
Yeah.
have X, you don't have Y, Z. And that's why the salary is this much.
Hmm.
So the self-worth is not comparable to what the job pays. And this is where candidates often get lost. They think
Yeah.
their worth is what should dictate the salary, which in fact is the description of the compensation, the duties and responsibility that dictates the salary.
Yeah. Okay. Julie, on the topic of education, we're seeing now enrollment at colleges and universities. It's actually quite low right now. I don't know if you've seen that. There's been tons of information about or stuff online about it. Why are people not going to school anymore or less? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would think that number one is cost.
Yeah.
And number two is that they've seen that they can become an influencer and make X amount of
Yeah.
dollars.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if you know, there's a
Yeah.
university now that you can get a degree in influencer.
I didn't know that.
There's some degree in the yeah, in Europe somewhere. You can get
Okay.
a degree and become an influencer. They teach you how to do that. So I don't know if
Yeah.
there's that effect
Yeah.
with those the younger generation, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more means to make money without a degree now. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of companies are also trying to shift their hiring based on skills as opposed to focusing on experience. So you could have certain skills without going through school for depending on what it is, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's a mix of that as well. And also don't forget that on Indeed, as of this year, this 2023, there were a percentage of jobs that were advertising without a university degree or education,
Mm-hmm.
and that would open up way more pool of applicant because in
Mm.
the US there's about, if I remember, let's say 50% of the population that has a degree, and when you remove that from your job advertising, then you
Yeah.
open up the pool of candidates to 100% versus, a certain amount that
Okay.
has a degree.
Well then, if that's the case, does university and colleges get discredited now? There's not as much value. It's not seen as valuable as it once did.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see because there's still companies
Yeah.
that only want to hire people that have a degree
Yeah.
versus people that don't. But don't
Yeah.
forget, we have a shortage of people. The shortage is not going anywhere. Companies need to reinvent themselves as to how they need to hire.
Yeah.
And that's why going to hiring people based on skills as opposed to experience and education may be the way for them to attract a talent.
Mm. Okay. You before we jumped online, you implemented now a 4-day work week. You're the only one that I know in Toronto that's doing a 4-day work week.
Yeah, I've started that. We're going into our third year starting in January. It's working out really, really well. And
Yeah.
the team loves it and it works
Yeah.
for us. And I haven't seen a decrease in productivity or even sales on our side. So it works for our
Yeah.
team.
So when you talk about, companies need to adjust, this is a perfect example of an organization adjusting to the labor market and saying, okay, you know what, this is what people want. As long as the productivity is there, then let's do it, right? Julie,
Yeah, it didn't. One thing I want to mention, it didn't come from my team. It came from me.
oh, okay,
It
I'm
came
sorry.
from me.
I apologize.
Yeah, it didn't come from my team. My team didn't really ask for that. But I
Okay.
thought that it would be a nice thing to do. And one thing I looked at as I looked at how productive they were during the week. So I
Okay.
looked at Monday to Friday, what days are they really productive?
Yeah.
And for me on the Friday, I would sit there and wait for the day to come, to go and to end. 3 o'clock is like, okay, is that time to open a bottle of wine now? It's like
Yeah.
it was like that, and it's my own company, and I work all the time, and I work after hours on weekends, on vacation, all the time. And I was thinking that to myself and putting myself in my team shoes, thinking, well, if I'm feeling like this, can you imagine they probably are wondering and waiting for 5 o'clock to come.
Yeah.
So I said, let's do that. And it worked, and
Yeah.
it's still working. So we're still continuing right now 4-day work week.
That's amazing. That's very smart, very smart. Julie, in your book, you talked social fit versus work fit. Just talk to me briefly what you meant by that.
What I mean by that is that, sometimes you meet people in in a social setting, right?
Yeah.
And you have great conversation and then you have really good time with them in a social environment. But when it comes to work environment, are you going to, if you take that person and put them in your work environment, or do you really think that they're going to be a fit for you in your team?
Hmm.
If they talk too much, there are people that you interview that talk too much.
Yeah.
Are they going to be a fit in your team because you like them because they talk a lot and you can
Yeah.
relate a lot during the interview process?
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be the right fit in your team,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll use
Okay.
myself as an example. You meet me in a social setting, you're gonna have a great time. We're gonna chat, we're gonna
Yes.
talk,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But when it comes to work, I'm very serious and dedicated. Don't talk to me when I'm working. I'm very hands down and I'm focusing, and I
Yeah.
don't want to chit chat about what you did last weekend and what you're
Yeah.
gonna do, for your vacation in 3 months. I'm all about business. And that's why there's that social aspect that you have to be careful. So when you're interviewing, you have to be
Yeah.
mindset of that.
And you're transparent when you are hiring for your team. You're transparent. Listen, these are my expectations, and this is my management. This is how I lead. You're obviously you let them know that, right?
Yes, I let them know one of the things I do not like, and people know I do not like training. I hate it with great passion. So the first thing I tell them when I interview someone for my team is that, listen, I do not like training. I will give you everything you need. I'll give you the basic. But if we have to repeat 3, 4, 5, 6 times, this is not me. It's not going to happen. So you have to be self-directed and be able to learn on your own and ask questions. Don't forget, and this is another thing I tell them, don't forget, I've done this for over 25 years. So in
Yeah.
my head, it's really easy and it's repetitive and it's routine. I won't, I'll try to remember what it was like to start, from the beginning.
Yeah.
But if you don't come forward and ask me questions,
Yeah.
it's not going to work. And that's why, for me, hiring based on they need to have a certain personality profile to know
Yeah.
how I work and
Yeah.
how they work. And
Yeah.
that's how I can make the best hire because of that.
Yes.
I need to know how they like to work and if they would fit with me. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They're going to think I'm terrible, and it's just not going to be a fit for
Yeah.
both of us, really.
Yeah. So transparency, just being transparent, and this is the way I lead
Totally.
and I
Yeah.
manage, right? Your book, Julie, it's designed for anyone in the hiring process, HR managers, anyone running a business, I guess, right? That was your
Yes.
target audience?
So anyone that's interviewing, that's looking for the right fit for their team, it could be a hiring manager, it could be a business owner, it could be
Yeah.
someone that's just getting into the industry as well, into recruitment.
Yeah.
It's written as a guide because I find that sometimes it could be it's more of a resource that you can use.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to hire salespeople, you can go straight to that. And
Yeah.
you've mentioned about hiring for social fit versus reserve fit,
Yeah.
that personality. So you really have to, depending on what you're looking for, you can go to that chapter and then
Yes.
talk about it. Like you
Yeah.
can read about it, and it's very simple, quick strategies that you can implement right away.
Yeah.
Because I felt that was missing. There were too many textbook, and by the book, I'm in business, and for me, I wanted to explain things how I would talk to you in the street and say, "This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
This is how you can work
Yeah.
and maybe make your team better."
Julie, it's an easy read. It's a short read, and it's very clear, and it's a lot of clarity in the book. So you make it easy for the audience to read, which I liked, right? And you talked about all topics from, succession planning to company culture to team building to leadership, even to body language. So all aspects of the hiring process, and in addition to that, the benefits of working with a headhunter as well too. You added that as well too, which I thought it was great. So it's
Mhm.
a great book. So
Well,
good for
thank you.
yeah, good for you for doing it. If anyone's watches and they want to buy the book, where do they get it?
They can actually go to my website at blueskypersonnel.com.
Yeah.
You can click on book, and it's available on all platforms. So Apple Book, Google Play, Amazon,
Yeah.
and I'm missing one. Um, I'm missing one, but
It'll come
it's
to you.
available on all platform,
Okay.
and you can click on the link, and it redirects you directly on your favorite platform that you
Awesome.
can purchase the book.
Julie, are you inspired to write another book? What's the future look like for you in terms of your writing another book?
Uh, there will be another book. I just
Yeah.
don't know when exactly, but there'll be
Yeah.
another book. And probably going to do this one in French as well, because I
Yeah.
think that would be beneficial for a lot of French Canadian. But
Yeah.
there will be another book. I just don't know when exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
this one is 2 years old, so when I
Okay.
released it. So
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, as you mentioned earlier on the call, it does take a lot. when you're running a career, running a business, and then doing
Yeah.
this, it does take a lot, right? So,
Mhm.
um, Julie, what do you read? Are you an avid reader? Do you read often?
Well, I read when I have time. And most of the time, what I read now is that I do a lot of research and article on the labor market,
Yeah,
the trends and HR. I read a lot of that when it becomes available. And
yeah,
when I go to conferences as well, because I travel a lot for
see that.
conferences,
Yeah,
I educate myself with a lot of the content that I read from the speakers. After that, I take that information and often I can use it and in my own speaking engagement as well. So I can pick
yeah.
and choose from what I want from that.
Awesome. What's the labor, in your opinion? I want to hear from sitting in your chair. You talked earlier before we jumped on the call. The labor market, depending on what industry you're in. So, is it a hot labor market? Is it a cooler, or it depends on the industry?
It depends on the industry. All year, I've heard some staffing agency suffering, saying that they
Yeah,
were not doing well.
yeah.
Some of them were doing extremely well, and it depends on the industry
The
and
niche.
it depends on their specialty.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what I've seen. And I think the ones that have a specialty, and this is one thing that I talk about when I'm speaking to the people in our industry, is that you need to have a specialty in order for you um, to stand out from the crowd, basically, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then that's how you're going to be in demand, and you'll be such a specialist that you're
yeah,
going to generate business.
yeah. Well, I apologize. We just jumped onto the call, but you run Blue Sky Personnel, focusing strictly on temp permanent of bilinguals.
Yes, so we do bilingual French and English across Canada, and we do
Yeah,
temporary permanent contract across the country. So
yeah,
primarily, we do a lot of permanent positions because a lot of our clients are looking for bilingual candidates. But when it comes to
yeah,
temporary, it's across the board as well.
yeah, yeah. What inspired you? Like, what got you into the staffing world? How did you get into it?
I actually fell into it like
Yeah,
most of us.
yeah.
When I came out of school, I worked at an employment center. And my job for that summer, they gave me a contract where I was responsible to place 60 students into summer jobs. And
Wow,
those companies were getting a subsidy. My job was to place 60. I ended up placing 120 students that summer.
wow. You doubled
And
it.
I doubled it. And I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it. And I thought, is there a job like that? Is there
yeah,
somewhere I could do this job? And I started to research and
yeah,
I found that staffing industries was doing that, really.
yeah,
Except that we're not subsidizing anybody,
yeah,
but it was similar.
yeah,
And I started to, I actually applied just to two places, and one
yeah.
of them hired me right away.
Nice. And you
And
haven't looked back.
I never looked back.
Never look back. Yeah.
Felt it.
Well, you could tell just speaking to you, you have a passion for what you do. Like you could tell it. You can just
Mhm.
how you speak, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have an interesting question for you. We're gonna wrap up soon. I know you have a passion for what you do and you love what you do. What's the one thing about recruitment maybe you don't like or you dislike? Is there anything about your job you don't like? Because I can share one with you.
There's there's always something I don't
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
One thing I don't like is when clients, companies, when they make a hire, don't forget, I do not make the final decisions.
Yeah.
They are. So when they're selecting a candidate, they hire the person, that person starts,
Yeah.
it's their employees, their candidates, they train them.
Yeah.
When that person doesn't work out, they're looking for someone to blame. They come
Yeah.
around and say, that was your fault. Wait a minute, client. This is not my final decision.
Yeah.
You made the decision, not me. My job is to recruit. I do
Yeah.
the work before. What
Yeah.
happens after you've hired and selected someone has
Yeah.
nothing to do with me. And I'm totally upfront here, but this is what I do not like about our industry. And I find that sometimes companies and hiring managers, they're looking for someone to blame.
To blame. Yeah. And
Nobody
they
likes
point.
to blame themselves, right?
Yeah. And they point you're right. They point the blame oftentimes at the agency or the staffing firm that placed them, right?
Yeah. And we don't
Yeah.
place people, we recruit. That's completely different,
It's
especially when it comes to permanent positions and you
yeah,
make the final decision.
yeah. Great point.
So that's
Uh,
what I don't like.
that's a great
What's
answer, Julie.
yours?
I hate ghosting. Like I hate the go.
Yeah.
Like I've experienced it so much this year. Like candidates disappearing. It's just, it drives me bonkers. Like I had a candidate recently, I think a week, 2 weeks ago, we got her to an offer, and I was reaching out to her and I said, listen, we got an offer for you. They're really excited about you. Disappeared. Just didn't, and I don't get it. I don't get it. So, I'm big on Julie. I'm truly big on transparency. Every candidate that I work with, I think it's critical for us to get back to them. I always close the loop, whether it's good or bad news. I always close that loop, right? Because it is a small community. What we do is a small community, and I don't want to have that reputation. So I always close that loop. I give transparent feedback, whether it's good or bad,
Yeah.
right? So, Julie, I'm gonna let you go. If anyone's watching this right now and want to connect with you, how do they do that?
Best thing to do is to go on LinkedIn, Google me, or if you Google me, I'll come up
Yeah,
at the top of Google right now. So that's really easy. Or on LinkedIn, they can connect with me.
yeah,
And or go to my website at blueskypersonnel.com. You'll have all the links to all my social media
yeah.
platforms that you can connect with me there.
And I know you have a YouTube channel as well too, or
Yeah, it's blueskypersonnel.com, the
awesome,
channel. Yeah.
perfect. Julie, so I'm gonna wrap up. If anyone's doing hiring and needs some guidance, maybe pick up this book. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think you should pick it up as well too. So,
And I think right now all these platforms are doing promo for Christmas. So you
ah,
can get and download it for free. Like, I don't know, like my book is there in the promo. So you can
okay.
get a really good deal.
Julie, last question before I let you go. I could talk to you for hours. What was one thing writing this book? What did it teach you? What did you learn from writing this book?
That I have a lot more to talk about than I thought.
Yeah, you have a lot more to say.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, I hope you write another book, and if you do, I'll be the first to pick it up then.
Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Julie, have a great day. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.